If you hire 1099s for your company, there's a 90% chance that you're hiring wrong. How you doing? My name is Ron Hay, founder of Wage Shield and former state tax auditor turned 1099 consultant. I have over 6+ years of tax auditing experience, auditing companies just like yours and finding companies just like yours for stupid mistakes that can be fixed with the ease of just review. That's all it takes is just reviewing the 1099s before you hire them, and you can fix 6 to 7 figure problems every year. And let me show you how. So 90% of business owners hire 1099s wrong, and here's why. The first reason why is that the subcontractor isn't a contractor. They're an employee who works like a contractor. What I mean by that is they have a subcontractor who has a 1099, but they work like an employee. You tell them what time to come in, you tell them how much they're paid, you tell them exactly what to do, and you tell them where to work at. That's considered an employee because they're not independently established. Two, the 1099 recipient doesn't have any advertisements in real life or digitally. So there's no proof that they're independent contractors. What I mean by that is in real life, advertisement cards, decals on trucks. So a lot of times pressure washers or HVACs have the decals on the side of their work trucks. Advertisements outside, billboards, anything of that matter helps to show that they're independently established. Also, when it comes to digitally, only thing that really helps is portfolios, funnels, and websites. You can't use social media accounts just yet because these state and federal entities don't respect social media accounts. It's seen as something social and not a business platform. So if you have a Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you're promoting your brand on there, more than likely they're not going to take that as evidence because it's seen as social media and it's not seen as a formal way to actually advertise your company. Now, I think it's stupid as fuck. I think that Instagram, if you can make $1 million on Instagram, you should be able to use that as advertisement. But federal and state and even workers' compensation doesn't respect social media. So I will always suggest have an advertisement, decals on cars that you could take a picture of, or at the the best thing is for them to have a website. That's indisputable. If they have a website, that shows that they're independently established because they're actually seeking out other work from other people. Now, we go to 3. The 1099 contractor doesn't have a certificate of insurance for themselves or their employees. This is very, very important. I want to look at you. This is very, very important for my construction and blue collar workers. If you work in construction and you hire a subcontractor and that subcontractor, one, doesn't have the right certificate of insurance or doesn't have certificate of insurance at all, or they don't have the correct codes for their employees who work during the time for you, you will be fined and you will be fined hefty. Now, for example, say you're a construction company and you hire a roofer to come and actually do the roofing job for you. Now, if the roofer comes in and they give you a certificate of insurance that's 1, expired, or 2, doesn't have the correct class codes, you may be liable not only for that contractor, but for the work that the contractor did. So what I mean by that is, say for example, you paid out $200,000 to a 1099 contractor. They're going to charge you $200,000 at the field work rate and not the clerical work rate that worked for it, just for that employee or just for that 1099 recipient. What that means is that instead of you paying like $3 per certificate of insurance, you're paying $20 per $100 or $15 per $100, depending on your state and exactly what work was done. And this right here can quadruple your bill. I've seen 6-figure worker comp bills. I've seen 7-figure worker comp bills, to be honest with you. And it's very rare as 7 figures, but I've definitely seen 6-figure comp bills. And it's very, very hefty. And you guys need the work and help. So it's very, very important for my subcontractors and my blue collar workers to properly vet 1099s before they actually come in and do work for your business. Because this can cripple your business. You can be paying more for certificate of insurance than the work you paid for the 1099 contractor. And last but not least, the 1099 contractor performs work similar to yours. So if you're a roofing company and you hire a 1099 subcontractor as a roofer and they don't have any advertisements, they don't have 1 or 2 or even 3, they don't have any of these right here, you will be deemed as an employee. And if they deem you as an employee, you will be taxed. You could be taxed up to 3 different times from workers' comp, unemployment insurance, and the IRS. And this all can be done in the same year, which causes hefty fines. Now, what happens if you get 1099 hiring wrong? You're fined, you get late penalties, and you get interest from all three entities, and you cause big money. Two, you can be audited up to 3 years prior, including the current year. What I mean by that is you can be audited from 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. And if you incorrectly hired 1099s for all 4 years, you can imagine how hefty that bills get. Plus penalties and interest. And third but not least, you become a target. A lot of people outside of the industry or outside of the state tax don't know this, but we have target industries where if you continually don't submit 1099s correctly, you get put onto a specific list where you get audited every year and you get higher rates because you continue to do the incorrect thing. Now, the problem with this is that not only are you being targeted, but then you're being targeted and charged more every year. And a lot of employers, instead of them fixing the problem, they just put money to the side like it's taxes and think, oh, it's a part of the game. When it's not a part of the game. You're being taxed, and these state and federal entities and even private entities are taking advantage of you, making millions and billions of dollars off of you every year just off of the simple mistake of not hiring correctly or not asking for the correct paperwork. A lot of times 1099 contractors have the paperwork, but the employer never asks for it, so they never know what paperwork to get. And that's why a lot of companies get taxed 6+ figures. Now, here's how to hire 1099s correctly. First, they must pass the IRS 20-factor test and an ABC test. Now, this is a quick, slick, actual way to get around doing both. The ABC test is way more rigorous than the IRS 20-factor test. So if an employee or a 1099 contractor passes the ABC test, they will pass the IRS 20-factor test. So you can just conduct the ABC test, and then if they conduct and pass the ABC test, then they'll pass the IRS 20-factor test. Now, if you do the IRS 20-factor test and they pass that, but they don't pass the ABC test, then more than likely they're not going to be considered a 1099 contractor. I wouldn't even do that. I would sit there and try to either add them to my employee list, or I would try to get the paperwork to make them fit the ABC test. Now, two, they must have certificate of insurance depending on the industry. As I said before, if you work in construction, blue collar, pressure washer, roofing, even if you work as a med spa, certificate of insurance is important because one, you will be fined per $100. Two, you will be penalized and interest. It will go back to 3 years prior, and you're legally liable if they don't have the correct insurance. If something happens on the job and that subcontractor doesn't have insurance, you, the employer, are on the hook for that employee who's not even your employee getting hurt. So you can have a subcontractor who then hires someone else. They cannot listen to you, not put on a hard hat, and then they can boom, bust their head open, and they can sue you because they were on your job site without certificate of insurance and you were liable. This is one of the biggest problems with certificate of insurance. You need to make sure that 1099 contractors have a valid certificate of insurance that is up to date and that the codes are correct. And they must be independently established. So they must have advertisements, and at the very, very best, they must show that they work for other people. If you have a graphic designer and they only come in and they only work for you, or even better, let's say you have an accountant. I'm a tax auditor. Let's say you have an accountant. An accountant only works for you, but they work 3 times a year. According to unemployment insurance and IRS, that is an employee because they only work for you and they're not independently established. And if they don't have any advertisements showing they work for anybody else or that they're trying to work for anybody else, then they are considered an employee and you will be charged. Now, reasons why you should trust me. So I've audited over 1,000 companies in 6 years. Over 80% of those companies had payroll and 1099 errors. Over 80%. There was very few times where I actually looked at an audit and they were like, the payroll, the 1099, everything was on point. That's very rare. Only time that happened if it was a small mom and pop shop where they had maybe $5, $10, $20,000 in payroll wages and they had 3 1099s. But any company with more than 20 1099s or even 10 1099s, to be honest with you, they always hired incorrectly and they are always charged. The average fine I charged employers was $3,000 including interest, and that was just for one entity. I only was doing unemployment insurance audits, and I was charging people $3,000 for this specific problem. And I was finding them every year. year after year after year for this. And this is the very least. I've had places and times where there's been employers where they've had 800 1099s and all of them were incorrect. You can imagine how much you're going to be taxed for having 800 incorrect 1099s for 1 year. Imagine going back 4 years. That's thousands of incorrect 1099s that you're going to be charged for, and you're going to get a six-figure bill for. And you're going to be in a part of the targeted industry. You can be audited by 3 different entities, which is very important. IRS, local unemployment insurance, and workers' comp in the same year. And this can definitely lead to six-figure fines easily. 6 to 7 figures fines easily. Now, how do we help you? So, how we exactly help is first, we review all your 1099s and what services they provided to your company for the last 3 years. What I mean by that is, what services did they provide? Where did they provide services? How was payment determined? How were hours determined? What the contract looked like? Do they have a W-9? What advertisements do they have? We go through exactly everything we need for your 1099s. Then the step 2 is we do a reverse audit where we actually classify the 1099s using the government framework. The same framework I used over 6 years. The tax employers is the same framework I'm going to use to ensure that you're compliant. And we figure out what documents you're missing. As I said previously, you could be missing a W-9, you could be missing a certificate of insurance, you could be missing advertisements. We get all of this for you, and we actually do a risk assessment where we make sure that all of your 1099s have advertisements, they all have certificate of insurance, you all have proof that they're 1099 subcontractors, and we put it into a Google folder so that when you are audited, you have all the proof there that they're independent contractors at that time. Step 3 is we tell you which 1099s are at risk and costing you money. So for example, one of the biggest red flags with unemployment insurance is seeing a name and just a social security number. Now, if you have a FIN number, which is a federal identification number, then it's less likely that you're not a 1099 subcontractor. But majority of 1099 subcontractors, they just use their social security number and their name because they're doing smaller work. And once we see that, that's an automatic red flag. And there's an 80% chance that that person is going to be an employee. And then step 4 is we tell you how to correct these mistakes and gather the paperwork so when you're audited, you can easily get it. This is where we put in the Google documents, get all the paperwork, get the Google documents, and then we just keep it there so we can labor from year to year. So audit 2023, audit 2024, audit 2025. We just get all the paperwork for you so that as soon as an auditor asks for it, it's all there in the same format that I used to like it, in PDF, all labeled in order for you, so that when the auditor gets it, not only do they get it clearly, but they're happier because they got clear information. That's another hack. The better the information you give the auditor, more likely they're being lenient. Auditors always get messy paperwork. So if you give them clean PDFs, you give them the paperwork fast and steady, you give it to them correctly, and you're open and honest, it's more likely for you to actually get past a lot of smaller things than it is for you to actually get taxed. And step 5, our main goal is to save you money and legal fees. We want to make sure that all your paperwork is correct for all the 1099 contractors so that you're not taxed, fined with interest, or sued. So who is this for? This is for any business owner who is constantly hiring 1099s or want to hire 1099s in the future. The industry doesn't matter. 1099 compliance is the same for all employers regardless of the industry, except for a couple specific exempt industries, but that's very rare and they're far and few between. So majority of industries have the same 1099 standards that all other industries have. So what's the next